everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we get into our new episode, let's recap the emotional and shocking events from our last story. We followed Ty on his secret journey back to the borders of Heartland, where he witnessed a tender moment between Nathan and Lindy. The sight triggered a powerful instinctual love and the shocking, undeniable memory of his daughter's name. In a parallel story, we learned the full, dark truth of his past. He was held captive and his memory was erased as part of a sinister plan. The story ended on a massive cliffhanger as Ty, after finding a secret refuge in Jack's old fishing hut, awoke in the middle of the night shouting the name of his best friend, Caleb Odell. If you missed that incredible jaw-dropping story, the full playlist is linked for you in the description below. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now today, as Ty begins his secret investigation, Nathan makes a bold move to secure his own future with Amy. Let's get into the story. 3 days. It had been 3 days since Ty Borden, the man who called himself Benjamin, had awoken in the darkness of the old fishing hut with the name of his best friend on his lips. The memory was another piece of the puzzle, another ghost from a past he was now desperately, methodically trying to piece together. He had stayed hidden, his small, rustic cabin a perfect secret base of operations. By day, he would discreetly observe the rhythms of the Heartland ranch from a safe distance, a silent, unseen sentinel watching over a family he knew, on a deep cellular level, was his. And by night, he would sit with a small, tattered journal he'd bought in town, painstakingly writing down every fragmented memory, every flash of a face, every whispered name, trying to assemble the shattered mirror of his own life. While Ty was engaged in this quiet, desperate battle for his own identity, the family at the heart of his quest was enjoying a rare moment of peaceful, uncomplicated domesticity. The scene in the Heartland kitchen was a picture of a perfect, sprawling family breakfast. Jack was at the head of the table, a quiet, steady patriarch watching over his flock. Lou was there, having stayed the night, her usual high-strung energy softened by the simple, happy chaos of the morning. Tim had stopped by for his morning coffee, his presence a familiar, rumbling bass note in the symphony of the family. And at the center of it all was Amy, Lindy, and Nathan. Nathan had become a near-permanent fixture at the breakfast table, his presence as reliable as the morning sun. He had seamlessly, skillfully, and completely integrated himself into the fabric of their lives. He would bring fresh eggs from his own ranch, would help Jack with the morning chores, and had an easy, charming rapport with every member of the family. Amy watched him now as he laughed at a story Tim was telling, the sound a warm, easy rumble. She looked at the way he then turned his attention to Lindy, helping her cut her pancakes into perfect bite-sized pieces, his movements full of a gentle paternal patience. She saw the way Jack looked at him, a look of quiet, respectful approval. She saw the way Lou treated him, not as a guest, but as a part of the family, and she felt a sense of profound and deeply calming rightness. Her heart, which had been a chaotic, storm-tossed sea for so long, had finally found a quiet harbor. The vision of Ty in the stars, the unsettling memory of the crematorium, these things had faded, dismissed by her own rational mind as the last desperate ghosts of a grief she was finally ready to release. Ty was her past, a beautiful, tragic, and perfect past. But Nathan was her present. He was real. He was here. He was a good, kind, steady man who was wonderful with her daughter and was loved by her entire complicated family. The choice, which had once seemed so impossible, now felt simple. It felt right. This was her new beginning, and she had to be brave enough to cherish it. After the meal was over and the plates were being cleared, the easy, comfortable atmosphere of the morning took a sudden, unexpected turn. Nathan, who had been chatting easily with Tim about the price of cattle, turned to him, his expression suddenly more serious, more purposeful.
Hey, Tim, you got a minute? I was wondering if you'd take a walk with me.
There's something I'd like to show you.
The request, so formal and so slightly mysterious, made the entire kitchen fall silent. All eyes turned to him. Lindy looked confused. Jack's expression was one of quiet, knowing curiosity, and Amy's heart gave a sudden, hopeful, and slightly terrified lurch. Tim, surprised by the sudden formality, just nodded, a curious grin on his face. Sure, Nathan, lead the way. As the two men walked out the back door, leaving a wake of stunned, anticipatory silence behind them, Lou, who had been watching the entire exchange with a sharp, intelligent gleam in her eyes, slid into the chair beside Amy. She leaned in, her voice a low, excited, and teasing whisper.
Well, well, well. A private walk with Dad. We've seen this movie before, haven't we?
She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively.
Looks like someone's about to ask for his favorite daughter's hand, just like Ty did all those years ago.
Amy's face flushed with a brilliant hot blush. She tried to dismiss the idea, to wave it away as just Lou being dramatic.
Don't be ridiculous. He probably just wants his advice on a new horse.
But her heart was pounding a frantic, hopeful rhythm against her ribs. The idea, which had been a terrifying abstract possibility just a few short weeks ago, now felt like a real, tangible, and beautiful inevitability. And she was surprised to find that she wasn't scared. She was ready. The back door of the Heartland house clicked shut, leaving Amy and Lou in a state of suspended, hopeful animation in the kitchen. Outside, the world was a brilliant, sun-drenched canvas of green and gold. Nathan and Tim walked together, their boots crunching on the gravel path that led away from the main house and towards the open pastures. They didn't speak at first, the air between them filled with a comfortable masculine silence, the quiet understanding of two men who respected each other. Tim, for his part, was deeply curious. He had a profound, almost primal, protective instinct when it came to his daughters, and any man who wanted a private word with him about Amy immediately set his internal alarms on high alert. But he liked Nathan. He had seen the man's quiet, steady presence in his daughter's life over the past few years. He had seen the way he was with Lindy. He respected him as a fellow rancher, a man who understood the hard, honest work of the land. But he was still watching him, his keen, perceptive eyes missing nothing. They walked past the main paddock, where a few horses were grazing peacefully in the warm afternoon sun. Nathan finally broke the silence, his voice a little more formal, a little more hesitant than usual.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me, Tim. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, but you didn't drag me out here to admire the view. What's on your mind, son? Nathan stopped walking and turned to face him, his expression one of profound, serious sincerity. This was it. The moment he had been planning, the conversation he had been rehearsing in his mind for weeks. He had already secured the financial backing of his corporate partners. He had already, he believed, won the heart of the woman he wanted. Now all that was left was to secure the blessing of her father, the final formal step in his meticulous, long-term plan.
You know, Tim, when I first came to this area, the last thing I was looking for was, well, any of this. I was just focused on building my ranch, on my work.
He looked over at the Heartland house, a fond, genuine smile on his face.
And then I met your family. I met Amy. I saw what she was going through, the incredible strength she had, and
I wanted to be a friend to her, that's all.
Tim just listened, his own expression unreadable, his arms crossed over his chest.
But over the last 4 years, watching her, being a part of her and Lindy's life, that friendship, it grew into something else. Something more, something real. I love her, Tim. I love your daughter with all my heart, and I love that little girl like she was my own.
The confession was powerful, heartfelt, and delivered with a quiet, unwavering conviction. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a small, dark blue velvet box. He opened it. Nestled in the pristine white satin was a diamond ring of breathtaking beauty. It was a large, square-cut diamond, simple, elegant, and of a quality and size that spoke of a deep and very real wealth. It glittered brilliantly in the bright Alberta sun.
I bought this last week, and I wanted you to be the first one to see it, before I ask her.
He held the ring out for Tim to inspect. Tim looked from the stunning, brilliant diamond to the serious, hopeful face of the man in front of him. He saw the genuine, profound love in Nathan's eyes. And he saw a future for his daughter, a future that was not defined by the tragic, heartbreaking ghost of her past, but by a new, bright, and incredibly stable present. He had been so worried for Amy. For 4 long years, he had watched her grieve, had seen her struggle, had feared that she would be a prisoner of her own tragic love story forever. But this was a new chapter. This was a chance for her to be happy again, to be part of a whole and healthy partnership. This was a good man, a successful man, a man who clearly adored his daughter and his granddaughter. And after all the pain, all the sorrow, all the years of just surviving, it was everything he could have possibly wanted for her. A slow, wide, and deeply satisfied grin spread across Tim's face. He let out a loud, booming laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief and joy. Well, I'll be damned, Nathan. You don't do things by halves, do you? He reached out and, instead of taking the ring box, he grabbed Nathan's hand in a firm, powerful handshake. "You have my permission, my blessing, whatever you want to call it. You're a good man, and you'll make my daughter very, very happy." The two men stood there for a moment, two generations of patriarchs sealing a pact that would change the future of the Heartland family forever. And in his moment of triumph, as he looked at the smiling, approving face of his future father-in-law, Nathan knew, with a calm, cold certainty, that his long, patient, and meticulously executed plan was finally, inevitably, and completely falling into place. The land, the legacy, and the woman, they would all soon be his. While Nathan Price was securing the blessing of a happy and unsuspecting Tim Fleming, the man whose life he was systematically trying to conquer was engaged in a very different and much more desperate kind of mission. The small, secluded fishing hut deep in the Heartland woods had become Ty's fortress of solitude, a secret base of operations from which he waged his quiet, lonely war to reclaim his own past. He had spent the last week in a state of intense, focused, and almost monastic dedication. His days were a blur of painstaking, clandestine investigation. He had altered his appearance further, letting the beard he had grown in Montana become thicker, more unkempt. He had bought a pair of cheap, non-prescription glasses from a drugstore in a neighboring town, a simple but effective disguise that altered the familiar structure of his face. Dressed in worn, second-hand clothes, he was no longer the handsome, capable Ty Borden, or even the rugged, quiet Benjamin Cooper. He was a ghost, a drifter, an anonymous, and completely unmemorable man who could move through the world without drawing a second glance. And it was this anonymity that was his greatest weapon. His new life was a strange, nocturnal existence. He would sleep during the day, hidden away in the deep, quiet woods, and then, as dusk began to fall, he would begin his work. He would walk the long, quiet miles into the small, familiar town of Hudson, a place that was both his hometown and a completely foreign country. He would sit in the corner of a quiet cafe, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours, and he would just listen. He would listen to the easy, comfortable chatter of the locals, to the familiar rhythms of a small town, and he would try to find his place in it all. But his most important work took place in the hushed, reverent quiet of the Hudson Town Library. It had become his second home, a sanctuary of knowledge, a place where he believed the answers to the mystery of his own life were hidden, tucked away on a dusty, forgotten shelf. The head librarian, a kind, elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, had taken a quiet, maternal pity on the strange, sad-eyed man who would appear every afternoon and read with such a desperate, hungry intensity. She assumed he was one of the many transient workers from the nearby oil fields, a lonely man with a love of books. She would leave him a cup of tea on his table, a small, kind gesture that was a beacon of light in his dark, lonely world. He was a man on a treasure hunt, but he didn't even know what the treasure was. He devoured the town's history, reading thick, dry volumes about the founding families, the agricultural booms and busts, the very bedrock of the community he had once been a part of. He was searching for a name, a clue, a single familiar word that might unlock the next door in the long, dark hallway of his own mind. He read about the Bartlett family, about their long, storied history, about the profound, almost legendary legacy of the Heartland Ranch. He saw pictures of a younger Jack, of a beautiful, vibrant woman named Marion, who, the book said, had been a miracle worker with horses, a gift she had passed down to her daughter. He read the name Amy Fleming over and over, the words a familiar, painful, and beautiful ache in his heart. He was a man piecing together the puzzle of his own life, but he was doing it from the outside in. He was learning the public, historical facts of the family that his heart, his soul, his very bones told him were his own. He read about the tragic, untimely death of Marion Fleming in a car accident. He read about the arrival of a troubled, orphaned girl named Georgie, who had found a new home and a new life at Heartland. He read about the Dude Ranch, Lou Fleming's ambitious and successful business venture. He was reading the story of their lives, and with every page he turned, his own sense of alienation, of being a ghost at his own family's feast, grew deeper and more profound. He was so close. The answers were right here in the black and white text on the page, but they were the stories of other people. He could not yet find himself in them. He was so engrossed in his research, so lost in the quiet, dusty world of the past, that he didn't notice the passage of time. He was hunched over a particularly thick, leather-bound volume, a detailed history of the most prominent families in the Hudson area, his eyes scanning the pages with a feverish intensity. He He was in the chapter on the Price family, reading about their long, complicated history in the valley, a history that was deeply and often contentiously intertwined with the Bartletts. He was searching for a clue, for a reason, for any possible explanation for the cold, dark, and terrifying memory of Nathan Price's face in that white room. He was so close. The answer was just a few pages away. But the soft, gentle voice of the librarian pulled him from his trance. "I'm sorry, dear. We're closing in 5 minutes." Ty looked up, his eyes wide and disoriented. The library was empty, the warm, golden light of the late afternoon now gone, replaced by the deep, moody blue of the approaching evening. He had been reading for hours.
Oh, right. Sorry. I lost track of time.
"That's quite all right. You can always come back tomorrow. The books aren't going anywhere." He looked down at the book in his hands, at the page he was on. A profound, irrational, and deeply frustrating sense of being so close to an answer, only to have it snatched away, washed over him. But he just nodded, a quiet, weary resignation settling over him.
Yeah.
If
Tomorrow.
He closed the heavy, leather-bound book, the soft thud of it echoing in the quiet, empty library. He stood up, his body aching from hours of sitting in the same hunched position, and placed the book back on the tall wooden shelf. He was a man on the very precipice of a great discovery, a single, frustrating page turn away from seeing his own name, his own face, his own story. But for tonight, the mystery would remain. He was still a ghost, a man with no name, a story with no beginning. And he had no idea that at that very same moment, just a few miles away, the future of the woman he loved was being decided, sealed with a confident, triumphant, and devastating handshake. Ty walked out of the quiet, hushed sanctuary of the Hudson Library and into the cool evening air. The sun had set, and the main street of the small town was bathed in the warm, inviting glow of the streetlights and the neon signs of the local businesses. He stood for a moment on the steps, his mind a chaotic jumble of names, dates, and historical facts. He had spent the entire afternoon absorbing the public, documented history of the family his heart was screaming was his own, and he was no closer to understanding his own place in it. He began the long, solitary walk back to his hidden refuge in the woods, his boots a quiet, rhythmic beat on the empty sidewalk. The frustration of the near miss in the library was a sharp, bitter taste in his mouth. He had been so close. He could feel it. The answer was there, just on the other side of a page he had been forced to leave unturned. As he walked, his mind began to sift through the fragments of information he had managed to gather. He thought about the story of the Bartlett family, their long, respected history in the valley. He thought about Marion, the mother Amy had lost, and her legendary gift with horses. And he thought about Amy herself, the beautiful, sad-eyed woman from the restaurant, a local celebrity, a miracle worker, a grieving widow. He was a man trying to assemble a complex, three-dimensional puzzle with only a handful of flat, two-dimensional pieces. He had been so focused on the recent past, on the mystery of the last 4 years, that he had not been prepared for the ghosts of a much older, more distant past to resurface. But his time in the library, the act of reading about the town, about its systems, about its history, had unknowingly unlocked a different door in the long, dark hallway of his mind. He was walking past the small brick building that housed the local sheriff's office when it hit him. A new memory. It was not a flash this time. It was a full, vivid, and deeply unsettling scene, playing out in his mind with a gut-wrenching clarity. He is a boy, a teenager. He is sitting in a small, sterile room, the walls a dull, institutional green. He is filled with a sullen, helpless, and all-consuming rage. Across a metal table from him sits a man, a social worker, his face a mask of weary, professional patience. The man is talking, his voice a low, monotonous drone, but the boy is not listening. He is staring at the scuffed toes of his own worn-out sneakers, his hands clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists under the table. He hears a name, Wade, his stepfather. He hears a list of his own transgressions, a litany of petty crimes, of fighting, of a life that is spiraling out of control. And then he hears the verdict. Probation. A last chance. He is being sent to a ranch, a place for troubled youth, a place called Heartland. The memory was so real, so powerful, that Ty stumbled, his hand flying out to brace himself against the cold brick wall of a building. He squeezed his eyes shut, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He was not just a man who had lost a beautiful life, he was a boy who had come from a broken one. The memories, now that a new door had been opened, began to flood in, a torrent of a past he had been so desperate to forget that his mind had perhaps been complicit in its own erasure. He remembered the anger, a deep, burning, and constant rage at a world that had been unfair to him from the day he was born. He remembered the feeling of being an outcast, a troublemaker, a disappointment. He remembered his difficult, often violent relationship with his stepfather, Wade. And he remembered the profound, aching loneliness of being a boy with no one in his corner, a boy who had to fight for every scrap of respect, for his very survival. These were not the golden, sun-drenched memories of Amy and Lindy. These were the dark, ugly, and painful memories of a past he didn't want, but they were his. They were a part of his story. And they added a new and even more confusing layer to the mystery of his own identity. How had that angry, broken boy become the smiling, confident man in the photograph with Amy? How had he gone from a juvenile delinquent on probation to a beloved member of the most respected family in the valley? The chasm between the two versions of himself, the boy he was beginning to remember and the man he was supposed to have been, was a vast, terrifying, and completely unbridgeable abyss. He finally made it back to the dark, quiet woods, the familiar, comforting silence of the wilderness, a welcome relief from the chaotic, noisy ghosts of his own past. He reached his small, hidden hut by the river, his mind a raw, jangled mess of conflicting emotions. He was no closer to understanding the mystery of his disappearance, of the White Room, of Nathan Price. But he was beginning, in a painful and deeply unsettling way, to understand the man he had been before it had all been taken from him. He lay down on his cot in the darkness, the fragmented, warring pieces of his own life swirling in his mind. He was a father. He was a husband. He was a horseman. And he was a criminal. He was a man who was deeply, profoundly loved. And he was a boy who had been angry, alone, and lost. He was a hero, and he was a villain. He was a man of two pasts, and he had no idea how they could possibly exist in the same person. The journey to find his future was now inextricably tangled with the terrifying, painful, and necessary journey of confronting the man he used to be. The librarian's gentle, final call for closing time was a reluctant summons back to the present. Ty stood up from his small table in the corner of the Hudson Library, his body aching from hours of sitting in the same hunched position, his mind a raw, jangled mess of conflicting emotions. He was a man of two pasts, and he had no idea how they could possibly exist in the same person. The frustration of the near miss, of being just a single page turn away from a truth he so desperately needed, was a sharp, bitter taste in his mouth. He closed the heavy, leather-bound volume, The History of Hudson's Founding Families, the soft thud of it echoing in the quiet, empty library. He placed the book back on the tall wooden shelf, his fingers brushing against the worn gold-leaf lettering of the spine. For a moment, he was tempted to just take it, to slip the book into his duffel bag and bring it back to his hidden refuge in the woods, where he could devour its secrets in the quiet solitude of the night. But he didn't. The boy he was beginning to remember, the angry, troubled kid who had lived a life of petty crime, would have taken it without a second thought. But the man he was now, the quiet, respectful man who had earned the trust of a kind, elderly librarian, could not. It was a small, almost insignificant moral victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. "You find what you were looking for, dear?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice full of a gentle, maternal kindness as she stood by the front desk, waiting to lock up.
Not yet. Oh. But I think I'm getting closer.
His voice was a low, weary murmur. "Well, the past isn't going anywhere. It'll be right here waiting for you tomorrow." He gave her a small, grateful smile and walked out of the quiet, hushed sanctuary of the library and into the cool, evening air of Hudson's main street. The sun had set, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple, the first stars of the evening just beginning to appear. The street was quiet now, the shops closed, the daytime bustle replaced by a peaceful, small-town calm. He began the long, solitary walk back towards the woods, his mind a chaotic whirl. He was so consumed by his own internal turmoil, so lost in the violent, crashing waves of his own returning memories, that he barely registered the world around him. He didn't notice the two men who emerged from the warm, inviting glow of Maggie's diner, just down the street. He didn't see them as they paused on the sidewalk, their conversation serious, their handshake firm and full of a shared, triumphant purpose. The scene was a perfect, heartbreaking tableau of dramatic irony. On one side of the street, a lost son, a forgotten husband, a man who had just spent his entire day painstakingly, desperately searching for the truth of his own identity, a truth that was hidden just a single page away. And on the other side of the street, the two men who held all the keys to his future, his father-in-law, Tim Fleming, and his rival, Nathan Price, having just sealed the pact that would give Nathan the blessing to take Ty's place, to build a new life with his wife, to become a new father to his daughter. The three men, the three crucial points of this unfolding, tragic triangle, occupied the same small stretch of a quiet, small-town street for a single, fleeting moment. They were separated by no more than 50 feet of asphalt, a universe of secrets, and a profound, heartbreaking ignorance of each other's presence. Ty, his head down, his mind 1,000 miles away in the past, turned the corner and began the long walk down the dark country road that would lead him back to his lonely refuge. And Tim and Nathan, their minds full of the bright, hopeful promise of the future, walked in the opposite direction towards their separate, comfortable lives, completely unaware that the ghost they had just spent their days discussing, planning for, and making decisions about had just brushed past them in the twilight. The hunt for the past and the race for the future were on a collision course, and none of them could possibly imagine the wreckage that would be left in their wake.